NFL Week 11 proved to be the calm after the storm that was the NFL Week 10 in Survivor pools. Of course, I am Statsational here with you for the Sharp app. The show is called Scratch and Survive, and one of the most unique and most popular shows on the internet when it comes to Survivor pool analysis. We're going to take it in a different direction than maybe a lot of channels out there. So stay tuned for hopefully some advice that's going to take you all the way to the finish line in your pool and win you all that money. All right. We had a week in week 11 where it was close. It was close with some of the big favorites and some of the more popular picks in Survivor going down. Ultimately, a lot of people, of course, were on that Thursday night game as we expected. And New England while the game was kind of tight for a while, seemingly had that game in hand. So that one wasn't too bad of a sweat, but we had a lot of them over the weekend that were close. Giants were close in that Green Bay game. The Browns were close to upsetting Baltimore. We had some instances there. We did get the upset with Carolina, maybe knocked a couple of people out. In my pool, knocked 2 people out of the 38 with Atlanta. If you look at Circa, they lost something 60 some odd people when they started with 1,000. I think it was 61. One person even took Kansas City in that pool. Grandissimo, the $100,000 buy-in pool, 6 people, nobody knocked out. I believe it was 4 New Englands and 2 Pittsburgh in that pool. So that's a good pool for those of you who are in a situation where you're just down to maybe less than 10 people in your pool. See how they're playing it, because for the most part, they're going to try to play an optimal strategy, which is what I tell you guys to do, especially when you're down to a small amount of people left in the pool. When we look at my spreadsheet, I always look at it at 0 future value, which essentially you can just go and look at the point spreads for these games or the money lines, and that's going to tell you the same thing the spreadsheet will at 0 future value. The reason we're doing that is we're just trying to find the optimal path for at least the next 2 or 3 weeks, outside of maybe playing a little bit of game theory or playing a team like maybe Baltimore last week that was a big favorite. They're a big favorite again this week, and maybe wanting to change it up a little bit. For the most part, we're trying to play the team with the highest probability of winning in a small pool. Ideally, if you could be on that team with very few, if not nobody else on that team, that would be even better, because we want to get ourselves in a situation as many times as possible to be able to win the pool in one shot, right? So if we could be the only way we can win the pool is if we're the only entry on a team. Now, you have to weigh, does that mean taking a team that's very unlikely or very low chance of winning, that's still a favorite, maybe a 55% chance favorite to win a game? In some situations, that might actually be the smart play. If you've got 9 people all on a team that's a 7-point favorite, it may justify 9 out of 10, let's say. It may justify taking a 55% team to give yourself that shot right there to win the pool. But in the spreadsheet that I'm going to show you guys, and for those who've been here, you understand it, we'll see if that makes sense this week. The other thing we need to be thinking about, hedging. And I want to just say this week seems pretty cut and dry as far as the teams to take. And, there's not too many options. We're going to go over it. But so I do want to just touch on hedging a little bit more than maybe we're going to talk about some of the games this week. Hedging, as we get closer to the end of the season, becomes easier. As we get less people in our pool, it becomes easier. And by easier, I just really mean we have a better idea of how much we can hedge. If you start hedging, again, guys, always in these scenarios, take the extreme. If we start hedging in week 1 and there are obviously nobody eliminated from the pool, and we're going to start hedging, you should be able to see that rather quickly, if we're winning in the pool, we're advancing, our hedges are going to keep losing. And there's a potential there that we're going to lose way more money than we're going to win in the pool, because it's going to kind of grow exponentially. Right? And there's different ways that we could do this, but for the most part, the losses are going to accumulate quite quickly, and there's the potential there for us to lose way more money than we win, or lose at some point down the line where we're now down way more than what our entry was. So as we get closer to the end of the year, as in we've got the very last game to be played on the season, and I know the way the season breaks up, there's a 1 o'clock slate and a 4 o'clock slate on the last day of the year. And so there's not one standalone game on a Monday night on the last week. But let's just say you have the 4 o'clock game and everyone else in your pool, maybe there's 3 other people, all took the same game at 1 o'clock and they lose. You've now got way more information than you did in week one. You're now in a situation where if your team wins, there's no other games to play. Everything is right there in front of you. You know if you're going to win $10,000 or you're going to split it with 3 other people, right? Assuming that's the rules here. They get all knocked out. We all get knocked out in the same last week of the year. Maybe we all chop it. So we're going to either win $2,500 or $10 based on whatever your last team playing is. Well, now we know exactly what we can hedge because we know exactly what we're going to win. We're actually not going to lose in this situation. So we're either going to take home $2,500 or $10,000. Maybe you don't want to hedge at all because you're satisfied with that outcome. Or maybe you just want to risk another 1,000. Whatever it is, you can now make a much easier determination based on your risk, how risk averse you are and what you're willing to take and what you're willing to take as a minimum for the course of the year. But that's going to be totally up to you. So as you can see, you get closer to the year end, more information and less time, you can make a more informed decision. So now we're at the point here, week 12. It's still hairy. We've still got a lot of weeks left in the season. Excuse me, just dealing with a little bit of a cold. Just got back from New York on a trip. One of the advantages of being in this industry and being a professional sports bettor and a professional DFS player, you do get invited to a lot of cool events. Was at UFC in the suite at Madison Square Garden on Saturday night. And then they took us, I'm not a huge WWE fan, but we went to John Cena's last Raw on Monday night and a lot of late nights. So excuse me if the voice doesn't sound as it typically does, but dealing with that, but all is good. Trust me. But with the hedging this week, there's an interesting scenario. As I mentioned, we want to get as much information as we possibly can before we start hedging. That means within a week itself, if we could take the last game of the day or the last game of the entire week, of course, that gives us more information. We have that situation where one of the more popular teams this week is playing on Monday Night Football. So there may be some of you who have that situation in your pool. You may be the lone person with maybe a head-to-head pool, 3-4 people left. You may be the only person on that Monday night game, and that will give you a hedge advantage. So let's kind of dive in here to this week. As I said, I think it's really shaping up to be a rather easy week. It's kind of like the picks are picking themselves here for most people this week. Let's look at the spreadsheet. This is the pick percentage here from, we'll hide these. That's just the money lines there that we're taking and calculating the midpoint. But here's your win probabilities for each of these teams this week. This is their future value. That is based on the point spread for all of their games remaining, what we perceive their point spread to be. And pick percentage, this is coming straight from Survivor Grid. What they are seeing is pick percentage. So you can see we're really looking at 3 teams that are getting all of the pick percentage. There's reasons for that. Well, one of the reasons is both Baltimore and Seattle here are close to a 90% chance to win. Obviously, they are the 2 most likely to win their game this week. They're going to garner some attention, but at this point in the season, we also need them. The team that we're going to take, we have to have them available. So obviously, we're going to be in situations where more and more, we don't have as many teams to take. But there are still some people who could take Baltimore, still some who could take Seattle. Both of those games, especially Baltimore, I believe had been taken by more people in most pools probably than Seattle had been. But you've got both Baltimore and Seattle, the 2 biggest favorites. Maybe not everyone could take them. I know in Grandissimo, I believe there's one person, might be 2, but I know there's definitely one who has both of these available to them. Not many people are in that situation. I ran through my pool. We're down to 36 people. There were a few who have both Baltimore and Seattle. That's a big advantage. And I'm going to get to why that's a big advantage in a second. But then after those 2 teams, it's like Detroit, yes, garnering about 10% of entries and picks on them. They are the next biggest favorite here to win this week. But people have taken Detroit, and we may get some more options on Detroit later. New England, as we know, just a boatload of people took them last week. in the DraftKings pool with that I'm going for the $1 million. That's a lot of people have asked. That's $1,000 entry pool on DraftKings. Started with 10 entries. We're down to 2 on that. And I believe 70% of the people in that pool took New England last week. So you can see a lot of people won't have New England for this week. And then you wind up down at San Francisco, where a team that's been banged up for a lot of the year, not a lot of chances to have taken San Francisco. And so people who don't have Baltimore, don't have Seattle, I'm in that situation in a couple of spots, are going to have to go down to San Francisco because that's the next best option here to win their game. So you see 24% right now on Survivor Grid or on San Francisco. The Rams, another team we may have some better options for or have been taking. Green Bay's a team that's been taken. Not a lot of people want to take them against Minnesota. Green Bay's just been a team that's hurt people in Survivor. I think, top of my head, they probably knocked more people out than any other team. Interestingly, Carolina, a team that has both knocked people out from winning games that they weren't supposed to win and have been a team that's knocked people out because they've taken them as winners. So they may have, if you're looking at it from both sides, Carolina may have knocked even more people out than Green Bay. But Buffalo at Houston, we're getting down now to where these teams are 70% or less to win, so not a lot of interest on these teams down here. We'll head over to Survivor Grid. Take a look at Survivor Grid here. And Baltimore and Seattle, as we talked about, the two highest being taken so far, and it's close here with San Francisco. We'll see how it ends up in your pool. But Seattle, after this week, yes, they host Minnesota. Pretty nice spot, right? Not nearly as good as being at Tennessee. I know you road game people, you like to disregard all of the road teams that have won and advanced and forget about all the home teams that have knocked people out, a la Green Bay, right? So everyone forgets about those. But if Seattle were to lose at Tennessee, I will hear a ton of people tell me, see, that's why you don't take road teams, all right? But as we've known and we've gone over on this show, 13.5-point favorite, that's really what matters here. The being on the home or road is baked into the line. They're at Tennessee, really good spot. It's obviously going to be the best spot they're in all year. Home against Minnesota, they're not going to be a double-digit favorite. At Atlanta, home for Indianapolis, home for the Rams, which should be a great one, at Carolina, and at San Francisco. So this is going to be the best spot you've got left to take Tennessee. I don't think there's any doubt about it. Baltimore. Now, they were a huge favorite last week. Some people wanted to hold off on them last week in order to take them this week, knowing that they were going to be in a situation where a lot of people were going to have to take Seattle. And again, if you were in a smaller pool, that could have really looking at what everyone has available to them and trying to map out not just what you could take, but what your opponents can take is going to be advantageous. We do that down in the comments a lot. So I do enjoy getting your comments and kind of going over it. It helps me just make my picks better because inevitably I will do this video. There'll be comments that I wish I would have had before the video because it changes some of my thinking. But this week's going to be fairly straightforward for, I think, most people. You either have Baltimore to play or you have Seattle to play. And whichever one you have left that you can take, you're probably going to take. If you can't take either of them, you're probably going down to San Francisco. I mean, that's just the way it looks this week. And again, in your pool may be different who you've taken. So, but as a general rule, that's where most people are going, which is why we see, you've got about what, 85% or so, 80 to 85% of all pools, all picks are going to be on those three teams. So Baltimore, big favorite last week. They're going to be a big favorite here this week, or are already. They will be a big favorite next week. If you've got Baltimore and Seattle, where are most people going to go? They're going to take Seattle, right? Because they'll save Baltimore for next week. That makes sense. So if you're in that situation, it's kind of the way you have to play it. And there's going to be even less people on Baltimore next week because they either took them last week or took them this week, or they took them earlier in the year like I did. And a lot of people did that as well. So we're going to see a very low number on Baltimore next week hosting Cincinnati, which is why it's the smart play to just go ahead. If you had Seattle, go ahead and just take them. They are in a high likely situation to win. Of course, not a guarantee. You advance there, then you're going to have nice leverage next week when you get a team that may be the largest favorite of the week and not many people are going to be on. Those are the situations where we're trying to get in. Like 2 weeks ago, when you had a large number of people on Carolina, we want to be in those situations where we can get all. Those are the favorites that we want to fade. We'd love to be in a situation where we have a higher, where we could take the team with a higher win percentage than the majority or a good chunk of the pool, maybe the plurality favorite in the pool. So if you got 30% of people is the highest, like this week may be, 30% may be the highest on any one team. The problem is those are going to be the two biggest favorites, right? So we don't have a situation where we could do that, where we could get off of a team like Baltimore or Seattle and then find ourselves in a situation where we've got the team with a higher chance to win with much lower ownership. And on the spreadsheet, we'll go back to it. I'll show you. I know I just kind of added it as a point of emphasis for you guys to look at. But let's do it. Instead of talking about it, let's just kind of get over to the spreadsheet here this week, and we'll look at what I'm talking about. So on the spreadsheet, I just added this column, and all it is, I mean, very simple. You're just taking the win probability, all right, and we're multiplying that by the probability of this team, by the pick percentage, not the win probability, but the loss probability. Okay, so we're taking, this is about an 11% chance that they lose. We're multiplying by how many picks are being taken on them, 28.1%. You get about 3.1%. That's a fairly low number for a large favorite, which is why fading Baltimore and Seattle doesn't make a lot of sense to me this week. What was that number in Carolina 2 weeks ago? It was 9. You had about 30% of people on that pool, on that team in pools with a 30% chance to lose. 9% is a very high number. Speaking of, right, who's the highest this week? San Francisco. Now, I have to take San Francisco in a couple of my entries just because I don't have Seattle or Baltimore available to me. But is it a play we feel good about? No, not really. I don't want to be on a 25% team. The other option, you say, well, maybe get yourself down to a team that's a little bit weaker, right? So, yeah, the fade here in the threshold column, for those unfamiliar with the threshold column, it basically tells you when you get down to a small amount of people left in your pool, based on how many people are picking a team and their possibility of winning, if you get off that team, what's the minimum win percentage I'm going to need on another team, the team that I'm going to get off of that team for to play to win? So in this case, it's 69%. The problem you have here is you not only want to get off the team that maybe everyone in your pool is taking, you need to get on a team that no one else is taking, right? So it's going to be difficult to do in most pools this week. Again, if you're in a 5-person pool and it just so happens nobody has Seattle left and everyone has Baltimore left, okay, well, we can make a much easier determination as to where the picks are going to go. The more difficult it is to figure that out, more than likely you're going to have a couple people on Baltimore, a couple people on Seattle, and 1 or 2 people on San Francisco, just based on what the people have left in your pool. But we'll go over that, in your comments. So it's going to be more difficult here to really get off of the favorite. I think it's going to be a hard week. It's going to probably be a difficult week for someone to win, right? It may take just a wacky pick. And you say, well, let me get on one of these other teams. It's going to be difficult to get on these other teams. Rams, Green Bay. 1, you may not have them available to you. Probably don't have New England available to you. And 2, there just might be a better spot for it. Again, these are generalities. In your particular pool, it may be worthwhile to play a Detroit. You might be the only one who can take Detroit here and get off of one of these more popular picks. But look at this. So if we change these numbers, Baltimore and Seattle, we've got to really change it for your pool. If we're in that situation where you've got 5 people left and 4 of them are going to take Baltimore, you just know 4 are going to take Baltimore. Well, now we could just take about any team as a fade, right? But we better be sure that that's the case, because what if it's only 60%? Well, now we're really in a different situation where we've got to fade to Seattle, which if it's only 60%, that means there's probably someone else on Seattle with me. And do I really want to do that? Right? And do you have Seattle available to you to do? Or Detroit? Do I have Detroit? right? If I do, then yeah, maybe that's a good option. But let's take a look at Detroit in on Survivor Grid. Let's just see what they've got left on the season if you do have Detroit available to you, and that is an option. So let's take a look at that on Survivor Grid, and we look Detroit 10.5-point favorites this week. Now, better options? No. This is probably going to be the best spot to take Detroit, but like I said earlier, you've probably taken Detroit elsewhere. If you've got them available to you, they could be an extremely good leverage play. Just looking at the EVs here, we don't have great EV. EV on Survivor Grid, the higher the number is, the better EV. By EV, it's expected value. And essentially, it's going to be some combination of pick percentage and probability of a team winning, right? So the higher this pick percentage gets, the lower your EV is going to be. The lower this pick percentage, the higher, right? So you see a team that's why you're seeing the most popular picks are still a good EV because they're not being taken at a high enough percentage. The threshold tells you that as well on my spreadsheet. They're just not being picked at a high enough percentage to warrant getting off them. And again, in small pools, that could be different. But if you're in a moderate sized pool to a large pool, it's still tough to not take in either Baltimore or Seattle. If you have both, we talked about why Seattle would be the better option. And getting down to San Francisco is not the greatest play, but maybe your hands may be tied as it is with me, and you may have to go down to San Francisco. But you see that 0.87 EV here. Basically, that's telling you, look, they're being taken almost as much as these top teams at a 14% less chance of winning. So this is not a great spot. I don't feel great taking San Francisco, but again, I may have no choice. But if you look, I'm going to get these are all good teams, though. Rams, Green Bay, Buffalo, teams that have been taken or teams I'm going to want to take. Philly, Kansas City. So to get down to these teams, much more difficult to do. That's why I said you're kind of locked in here this week on who the best teams are going to be to take. There's one team that's interesting. I'll talk about it on the spreadsheet. Actually, let's bring it up now. On the sheet is Vegas. Now, I'm not making a case to play Vegas, but I do want to show you on the spreadsheet, if we look at future value, and we want to look at future value less and less because there's less future left, right? We're in week 12 of the season. But if I put it out to 75%, remember this spreadsheet doesn't know who you've taken, right? And I guess if I work hard on the offseason, I'll figure out a way to incorporate that in there. But if we look at 75% future value, of course, Vegas, who has basically no future value at all, kind of pops up here. By the way, of note, you could go pretty high and still have Baltimore and Seattle as the two best options to take. So that tells you something. That's why it's really hard to get off those two teams if you have one or both available to you. Vegas, though, because their future value is just non-existent, they will pop up here. Not saying I love the play. The only way I would consider this is in massively large pools. Taking a team like Las Vegas or a pool maybe that you've got a lot of double picks ahead, or you've got double picks this week. Pools like that, you may consider a team like Vegas because now, especially if you got double picks, you've got a much more likely chance of people being eliminated in double pick weeks because you've got to pick both teams correct. Having a team like Vegas, if they can advance and you get your other team to advance, could be massive leverage. But for the most part, Vegas is not a team we're going to be all that interested in. But I do want to note that in some instances, I think that would be the play. Now, do I particularly like the game? Cleveland's, if I'm going to start handicapping the game, which you guys know I don't like to do for survivor purposes, I don't necessarily love it. You hate playing against this Cleveland defense. They seem to be in all the games they play because of that defense. So do I love the game? No, but I just want to note the favorite here with the least amount of future value, really no future value, is Vegas. You see what I'm saying about all the teams that are favored this week are really good teams, or at least the best teams in the league. I don't know if any team's really good right now, but so it's hard to get, you've got Kansas City and Philly. Obviously, we could get better spots on those teams, and Buffalo and Green Bay, Rams, San Francisco. There you go, right? We're back to San Francisco. New England, everyone's taken. So that's kind of the situation that we're in this week. It's almost like the picks are the the picks are picking themselves this week from what it looks like. But again, you guys are going to have some different scenarios. You've got different types of pools. You guys are in double knockout pools, all that sort of thing, and we'll talk about that down in the comments below. But I think the week, unfortunately, it's kind of easy to pick this week. Doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be easy to win. I think finding our good leverage spots are going to be in different weeks. I don't think this is the week that we're necessarily going to find great leverage. Next week may set up, depending on how you look and the teams that you have next week may set up, especially if you've got Baltimore available for you next week as a spot where you can get really, really good leverage. But we're going to go into that, of course, in a lot more detail next week. Of course, guys, download the Sharp app at sharp.app. Continue to watch these videos every week as you're in your pool. I know some of you do watch when you've been eliminated, which is really nice as well. I appreciate that. But they come out Wednesday. Try to get them out between 11:30 and noon Eastern time in every week here on the Sharp app channel. So if you're appreciating these videos, I do appreciate you subscribing and liking them, share them with your friends, especially the ones that are not in your survivor pool as well. And hopefully we're going to get you guys all the way to the end. I know a lot of you are really, really close. I think we're going to cash quite a few of these survivor pools. Hopefully I can do that with you guys. Be nice to hit the $1 million over on DraftKings. But we're getting closer. We're not quite there yet. But I will see you guys next week, hopefully surviving and on to week 13. Good luck, everybody.